Scott Morris from Wetumpka, Alabama. In 2009, my wife and I were separated, and due to poor communication, I was not aware that she was pregnant. In May of 2010, I had a near-fatal accident. I spent several months in the hospital in a coma and woke up July 10th. In October of that year, I went to Arizona to go to Harley-Davidson mechanic school because I was not going to be allowed to work construction anymore. While at school, my wife called me in January to notify me that I had a son who was born while I was in a coma. Cody Morris was born June 22nd, 2010. We spoke daily from that point forward until my wife and mother-in-law got into an argument, and my wife went to jail. When she texted me that she was going to jail, please help, which was a Sunday, I believe the 21st of March or April, I can't remember, 21st of March, I believe. I went to school Monday morning. I quit school, rented a U-Haul, and drove to Alabama from Phoenix to get my wife out of jail and to collect my child and take care of them. When I started on the road through Flagstaff, I called the courts and told them that my mother-in-law was going to come down and try to take my child because she had done it before. And the magistrate informed me that she had come in that morning to do exactly what I told them. She lied, said there was no father. It's in writing in her petition. She has since testified that she knew we were married. When I talked to the courthouse magistrate daily on my progress across country, and he instructed me that when I got there to come by and see him. So I drove by the magistrate's office. He instructed me that we were still married, that I was the legal father of Cody, and for me to go get my wife out of jail, drive to the home where my son and now ex-wife were living with my mother-in-law, and pick my son up and take him to my home in Wetumpka. If I had any problems with that, to call the sheriff's department and have them come assist me, because the rightful place for my son was with his father and mother, as long as we had stable housing. Got my wife out of jail and drove less than 2 miles to her mother's house to get my son. DHR was already there. The two child custody cases that DHR has been involved in were 6 years apart, and these same DHR workers involved in both, and the same judge. The DHR worker told me that I could not take my son because I could not produce a marriage certificate. And I explained to her I don't run around with it in my back pocket. And she said, well, you're not taking your son until you can prove you're the father. I called the sheriff's department. They came out, did absolutely nothing, told me I could not take my son. So I left, got a motel for my wife and I, and tried to explain to her that we'd go about this the right way, and that her mother didn't have a leg to stand on, that the law was the law and that's the way it would go. I called Davidson County, Tennessee, which is Nashville, had them FedEx my marriage certificate to us so that we could have it ready for the meeting on Saturday with DHR. I produced the document to Royce Elliott of DHR and still did not get to take my child to his proper residence. At this point, my son's name was still Cody Gardner, which is my wife's maiden name. Since then, I've had court orders from Judge William Allen Summers stating that I'm the father, to have me added to the birth certificate, and court order from a Wetumpka probate judge, Judge Stubbs, to change his name to Cody Michael Morris, which Social Security has changed it also. We have gone about this as close to the book as possible on my part. My wife has a drug problem that's never been a controversial part. She admitted to that. She doesn't want custody. She wants, just like her 13-year-old, for her mother to get custody so she doesn't have to pay child support, and she can see him whenever she wants to, but doesn't have to raise a child. I've watched this go on for 13 years. Well, 10 years that I've known of. My wife had told me that she was off of drugs when I came back. The first place she wanted to go was the methadone clinic, which shows that our state's the biggest drug dealer in the state, because the state is funding the methadone clinics and selling it to the citizens, which is synthetic heroin. I don't do drugs. I've got a history of drinking. I enrolled myself in AA, and I go on a daily basis. I don't want my son to ever see me drink. I don't want my son to be around alcohol. I have been proactive in going to every parenting class that the state offers through the Alabama Parents Education Center. I have dealt with Alpha and joined them. I've gone to many Court of Appeals hearings on custody, and it's embarrassing to see that our courts are that corrupt. Everybody, they ought to be ashamed of themselves. These judges, we're supposed to look up to them and teach our children to look up to them. There's no reason to. You ought to at least have to read. I have been accused of being violent and told that I can't see my son because of my history of domestic violence with my wife, ex-wife. I've never been convicted of domestic violence with my ex-wife. My wife, on the other hand, has 4 convictions, 2 outstanding warrants for domestic violence with bodily injury against me, which shows I just didn't hit her back. She also has 2 more warrants outstanding and has been indicted for 2 felonies since she was pregnant with my son. Yet she gets to see him every week, and I haven't seen him in a year. The court system has basically listened to these sobbing stories and leaned toward the mother-in-law every time. I don't understand it. I've worked all my life. I didn't graduate from high school. I went in the Marine Corps. I enrolled in the Marine Corps in 1985. Got out late in 1986 with a physical disability, but it was an honorable discharge. I'm a self-taught contractor. I've been in the profession for a long time, and my responsibility is to take care of my son and to love my son like he's supposed to be loved. And my responsibility as a parent is to provide the skills and the training for my son through his childhood and adolescence, so that when I pass on, my son can take care of himself. And that's what a parent's job is. Now, the courthouse has stepped in, and Judge Summers, who obviously reading is not a requirement because I'm disabled through the Marine Corps and I'm disabled through Social Security, yet in his court order, he orders me to maintain employment. It doesn't work that way. The court orders originally were supposed to be equal for mother and father, that I was supposed to do whatever my wife did. But since she was an admitted drug addict, I've been taking drug tests for a year and a half now. think it's comical. There's another waste of my tax dollars because I don't do drugs. The sad part is I look at this. I tried to be cooperative with DHR because they expressed to me that my son was the most important aspect of this entire case. Had that been the case, that would be great. That's been nothing but the case. DHR has lied repeatedly, threatened me, tried to intimidate me. They repeatedly are still raising my son as Cody Michael Gardner. They're referring to him on court documents as Cody Michael Gardner. The judge has got a court order sitting in front of him. So you got one judge disrespecting another judge. It's not something I want my son to respect. Then it became a stable housing issue. Well, my housing's pretty stable. I've got a disabled mother, which is Cody's other grandmother, Betty Morris, and she's in a wheelchair. She's had a major stroke. She's only got to see her grandson for 2 hours since he's been alive. But the other selfish grandmother, Charlotte Gardner, has him every day and is raising him as Cody Gardner. I have no access to his medical records to make sure he's okay, to make sure he doesn't have any of the health problems that I have. I just want to do what's right as a father. You know, I've tried to set up a trust account with the excess money that my son's entitled to. The judge turned that down. He ordered $272 a month. That's fine. That's the first thing I pay every month. My son is my privilege to take care of. But I shouldn't be subsidizing somebody's retirement that was too lazy to get off and produce a good living for their family. The statistics that I've read over through my research have shown me all the problems and defects of character that develop from a father not being involved in their child's life, whether it be a boy or a girl. Suicide, drugs, imprisonment, poor behavior, violence. And I look at my ex-wife, and she's been arrested 5 times for domestic violence, beating me up. Imagine that. I'm the Marine, she's beating me up. Repeatedly arrested for drugs. Theft, felony burglary. And won't leave dope alone. It's more important than her children. Well, let's step back. Oh yeah, her dad committed suicide. So she's following right along with the statistics. I don't want my son part of that. I've done everything I can financially. I do have stable housing. I've had the same residence for 10 years. Just because I traveled for a job until I got injured. It doesn't have anything to do with it. I've still had the same address. Added 700 square foot to my house when I got home so that my son would have a playroom and there would be no gate to the backyard so that he would be secure and safe. I added video surveillance to protect him from his mother, since this is where she broke in and burglarized my mother's house. I've done everything I can do, and you know, I'm getting punished for doing the right thing day after day. And my son is the one that's supposed to be the important one here. And all they're doing is alienating my son from his father, who's the only capable person taking care of him in this family. Instead, they give him to a 64-year-old grandmother that, I'm sorry, just at that age, you could die any day. She's not going to live long enough, as far as math says. She won't live long enough to see him through high school. So there you're going to put my son in another traumatic position in his teenage, adolescent years where he's most vulnerable, in making him transition into another family household, trying to learn new friends, new areas, that type of thing. That's the hardest time of their lives, and you're going to put something else on him. I don't understand it. You know, if everybody would go in and tell the truth, especially DHR, then if the judge decided against me, I wouldn't like it, but I would understand it, and I would be able to accept it. But DHR has made false accusation after false accusation. First, it was because I was in the Marine Corps. I was a violent Marine. Man, that ain't true. Never got in any trouble in the Marine Corps. Never has suffered NJP, which is non-judicial punishment. Then it was I didn't have stable housing. Well, DHR's been to my house and looked at my house. I do have stable housing. But they won't talk about it now. Then they made other accusations. I've proved them wrong. I've offered to go on a polygraph. It's ridiculous. I don't know where the judge and the family values that we're supposed to have in the South, which is one of the reasons to live here, they've gone. They give my son a guardian ad litem that's a homosexual. Now, the guardian ad litem is supposed to represent my son's best interests. Where in anybody's world does that represent a little boy's interest? Don't see it happening. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to get Sandusky out for the day just to take care of him. I'm a little bit fed up. Judge William Allen Summers has been reported to the Judicial Inquiry Commission. He made me go to anger management twice now. And the funny thing is, on the anger management enrollment sheet, it says arrest date. There isn't one. Then it says time in jail. There isn't any. It asks these questions. Conviction date. There isn't one. Okay, there hasn't been any violence. It's just making up stuff to keep my son away from me and with his grandmother, who is too old to raise a child anyway. It's not what's in the best interest of my son. Every time that I've made an effort to intervene and get some separation for my child, I have included my mother-in-law, who I obviously don't like, and my ex-wife, who I will always love as my son's mother. I've asked for them to have generous visitation when I have custody of my son. I want them to feel welcome to come to my home and see their granddaughter and their grandson and son. I don't want my son alienated from anybody. He needs to know his whole family. He does have one grandfather that's 76 years old in Northern California, who's also prior military. And he wants nothing more than to take his only grandson fishing, which any boy out there knows that was fun. I mean, going fishing with your grandpa or your daddy was the best thing. And at 76 years old, and I'm 44, my father's still my best friend. And that's been a privilege. I just can't see a young boy missing out on his time with his father. So I don't know what can be done. I know what they're doing is illegal. Due process is a term used and thrown around loosely. It's supposed to be a right. My son was taken from me because DHR's worker just made an assumption based on somebody else's statement that I was not married. I've been married to my wife for 6.5 years when she made that statement. Last time I checked, they have to prove that I'm not the father before they take my son from me. I think that'd fall under Constitutional 14th Amendment, that I have the right to raise my child and to control his environment for his safety and well-being. That's not happening right now. They've ignored the 14th Amendment. They have totally thrown out due process. You know, if this was an isolated case, I wouldn't be here. But the governor of Alabama has been involved in this. He's been copied on all the court orders. The Attorney General's office has been copied on the court orders. State Bar Association has been copied. And everybody throws their hands up and says they can't do nothing. Well, then why are we paying you? It don't make sense. You're not doing what you paid to be there for. You're supposed to be there for us. And instead, you're just sucking up a check and showing our kids that it's okay to not do what you say you're going to do. My major heartburn in that position is Governor Bentley. You're real good at getting put on television when you're hanging a wreath for the veterans, when you're talking about how bad parental alienation is on the steps of the Capitol, when you're having your little make everybody feel good and rub their belly meetings because you act like you're such a caring individual. Well, this veteran's been asking for help from your office for a year and a half. You ain't done nothing. Your office hasn't done anything. They quit before they can help. Taylor Shattuck, or Mr. Shattuck, your legal counsel, he quit. You know, anybody that seems like they're going to get in a position to help quits. It doesn't show much stability in our state's government. But yet you won't stand up on television and say that DHR is wrong, because that's not your responsibility, even though you are the director of DHR. And if you don't want that responsibility, you shouldn't put that rank structure on the internet, because you're the top dog and you won't do anything about it. Why? Because that's not popular? Women aren't always right. There are 3 other men in my church that fought for years to get custody of their children, and it finally happened. But why is my son growing up learning his name is Cody Gardner when his name's Cody Morris? If next year I get custody of my son, or this year, God willing, then I've got to traumatically change the 3 years of bad learning that he's received and show him that people have lied to him since he's been born. This is a ridiculous way to bring a child into their world. It's already a poor moral society anyway. You would think we could look to our government, especially on the state level if we can't depend on the federal government, to at least support our family values that we're supposed to have in the South and try to establish a safe place for our children. You know, the guys that aren't paying child support and don't want to support their kids, you know, I understand. Deadbeat dad, all that stuff. I understand all that. I'm trying to do what's right by my son. I've opened 2 businesses since my son has been born, since I've gotten back. I don't take a paycheck. Everything in my businesses goes to my son's future. I'll live off my disability for the rest of my life. It ain't comfortable. I'm used to making $100,000 a year. And because of my injuries, I can't do that anymore. But I can work and show my son the 2 most valuable things that a man can show anybody in his life are his word and his work ethic. And as far as I've seen, none of our politicians or our state government have either one. So, I don't know what else to do. I'm going to keep going, filing appeals. You know, I don't know how you disrespect a child. That's God's precious gift. And when God decided that even though I was in a coma, that my son needed to be born and that I needed to have a chance to be his father, I didn't see a contract saying that some little judge in Birmingham, Alabama could change all that. I just pray for my son every day, and I hope that somehow justice will come through. And so far, I haven't seen justice. I've just seen a legal system that's spending my money. I don't know what else.